Remember, in the course of discussing movies, the host will spoil plots. You've been warned. Listen to their screams. Greetings, ghouls and creeps, and welcome to Listen to Their Screams, a horror podcast that feels like you're chatting with friends. I am one of your friends, Dave. We're joined as always by our other friend, Ike. Ike, how are you?
I'm doing pretty spooktastic today.
Yeah, me too, because I'm pretty excited because I absolutely love when we do the franchise episodes, and we're going to do probably the primo one for me. We're doing the Halloween franchise review today because this episode of our podcast is released on October 26th, and the first Halloween movie was released on October 25th, 1978. So we're coming out a day after the 45th anniversary of the movie. So we're going to chat all 13 Halloween movies and count down our favorites from 13 to 1. Before we get into that, let's talk a couple other things real quick. We're not going to do all of our news and stuff because this is a lot to talk about anyway. So we're going to skip all that part for now. So just friendly reminder to make sure you're following us on social media so that you can still see all that. All that will still be on social media. So make sure you're following us there. But Ike, before we dive into some of our other stuff, what's some of your first memories of Halloween, the Halloween franchise, and these movies?
No, absolutely. So for me, obviously, I was not born when the first Halloween movie came out. That was a good, probably like 17 years before I was born. So I think for me, I think the first Halloween movie I ever watched was the original Halloween, if I'm remembering correctly. Now, I was told by my mom that technically the first Halloween movie that I ever was present at was Halloween 6, Curse of Michael Myers, because she took me shortly after I was born to see that movie. So I was present during that movie, so I guess technically that would be my quote unquote first. But the first one I actually remember, like cognizantly remembering, was the television version of the first Halloween movie, because obviously Halloween's got some nudity. So the first one I ever watched was the censored version of Halloween many, many moons ago. And then, of course, over the years, I have, continued to grow my love for horror movies in general. So I've definitely, obviously, taken many a rewatch of the whole Halloween series. So I can comfortably say that I've seen all of the movies minus Halloween Ends at least 4 or 5 times. And honestly, I really want to rewatch Halloween Ends. I just didn't have time to this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've probably seen all of them at least 4 to 5 times minimum.
Yeah. Let's see. When the first one came out, I was only 3. When it first aired on TV, which was in '81, I was only 6. So I didn't watch it then. I was still a little young for me. Mine would have been a few years after that, probably not too many years after that, and it would have been a video rental, probably at my cousin's house because he really liked horror movies as well, and so a lot of my first horror movie watches were at his house. When my aunt would take us, we would go, whatever, get a pizza or burgers or whatever, and then go to the video store and usually rent a movie or two and some games. And so, yeah, it would have been, on a video rental then, sometime probably in the mid '80s. And it probably would have been the first one. I'm sure would have been the first one I watched. But there is a chance. I don't remember specifically, but there would have been a chance that we could have watched a couple of them, back to back by that time. But yeah, I mean, I love it immediately. Michael Myers is such a striking character that sticks with you. And the first movie is so spooky, and it is so, it's really, as a horror movie and as a whatever, it's kind of simplistic, right? It's sticks to your basics, right? But at that time, these weren't necessarily the basics, right? It established a lot of these basics, established a lot of the quote unquote rules or whatever that became synonymous, particularly through the '80s. And it's not a particularly bloody movie, but it is creepy, it is spooky, it is perfect at using shadows and angles and these reveals and Michael being in the background and all these kind of things. And it is terrorizing even to this day. And it to me, it's just, I mean, maybe we're spoiling our own thing here, but it is I mean, Halloween '78 to me it stands as a perfect movie.
Yeah.
I don't find flaw with the casting's perfect, the music's perfect. It is spectacular, and no matter how many times I see it, it really doesn't lose a lot of its luster for me. It is still creepy, still spooky, and it is still just so much fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And and one thing I do want to also kind of touch on that you mentioned is that for a lot of for a lot of for the most part, Halloween, defined the slasher genre, and I think even to this day, it helped not only create but refine a lot of the modern horror tropes. And I think that it does it very well. Obviously, we both love Halloween. Halloween's probably, I would say, in the upper echelons of our favorite movies, and like you said, I see very little fault with Halloween. Halloween, even for a product of its time, still holds up very well in a modern lens, and it's very difficult for a movie from the 70s, much less the 80s, to basically have that kind of reception even in modern times. And I think the fact that a lot of people still consider this movie to be a living classic is a true testament to the product of what it was back in '78. And the people who made it, John Carpenter, Deborah Hill, Mustafa Akkad. I mean, it's such an incredible group of people who got to work on this movie. Not to mention the incredible actors, Jamie Lee Curtis, Donald Pleasance, and many more. So definitely, when we talk about this movie, it always has sort of that nostalgia to it, but also just that true powerhouse of a Halloween horror movie that we know and love.
Yeah, and the first movie, it was intended to be a standalone, right? There
Yeah.
was not any intent or desire initially for Carpenter did not want to do sequels. He didn't
Yeah.
want it, didn't, he thought he had told the story and it was the way he wanted it. And, but, success and money creates another beast. And, I'm not glad, I'm glad about that because there's many, as we'll talk, many of the sequels that I love. And, so, it's a good thing. But when it was initially proposed or, created or whatever you want to say, wasn't meant, he didn't have future story in mind. This is what he wanted to do and what he wanted to tell. So,
Yeah.
but we'll talk more about those as we count them down here in a little bit. Before we dive into that, Mike, since we last spoke, have you watched anything else?
No, I have spent a lot of time rewatching the Halloween movies.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I didn't rewatch any of them. So I've watched them enough that I felt comfortable enough just diving in. Uh, I did watch a couple things. I watched Night of the Hunted, which is new on Shudder. It was pretty good. Pretty good. I liked it. Kind of, I advise people to go see it. I watched 2 Friday the 13th fan films that are on YouTube, the Never Hike Alone and Never Hike Alone 2. I've heard a lot of talk about them, and they are really, really good. They have a lot of the feel of Friday the 13th, so I advise people to go watch those too. They're on YouTube. They're for free. I mean, with ads, obviously, but they're good stuff. So I'm not gonna, we're not gonna spend a lot of time talking about that, but just to clear the palate, that's where we stand on what we watch. So let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll dive right into it as we count down our favorites of the 13 Halloween movies. So stick around. Make sure you subscribe to listen to their screams on your favorite podcast platform. Also, make sure you look us up on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, TikTok, and Slasher. All you have to do is look up Listen to Screams. That is Listen, the number 2 in Screams, and you can find us there. Also, make sure you go and buy yourself a Listen to Their Screams t-shirt. You can find all of our shirts at tinyurl.com/Screams Shirts. All right, and we're back here on Listen to Screams, and it is time for our franchise review and ranking. And again, just a reminder for anybody that may not know or may not have listened to one of our franchise episodes, these are in order of what we enjoy, what we like. It is not necessarily what we're saying has, whatever, the best production value or the best this and that, blah, blah, blah. It is simply based on our enjoyment and what we like. So take it for what it is. That is how it is. We would like you guys to come on to social media and let us know, though, excuse me, what you agree and disagree with and what your rankings are. I mean, I know these are a lot of movies, but let us know what your favorites are because I feel like there's franchises one of those, or Halloween's one of those franchises that there's a lot of variance. People really like different parts. There's, people that like different time, because there are different timelines and different things, whatever. So we'd like to hear some feedback on this. So let's dive right in, because there's a lot to cover and a lot to talk about. So Ike, why don't you kick us off with number 13 on our list?
Absolutely. So for people who maybe don't watch our other stuff, this may come as a surprise. For people who do watch our other stuff, this will not be surprising at all. But number 13 is Halloween 2, and we're not talking about the old school Halloween 2. We're talking about Rob Zombie's 2009 Halloween 2. It was released August 28th, 2009, written by Rob Zombie, directed by Rob Zombie, starring Scout Taylor Compton, Malcolm McDowell, and Tyler Mane as Michael Myers. This movie grossed $39,421,467 at the box office. So this earns a spot at number 13 for a slew of reasons. Mostly, unfortunately, the Rob Zombie Halloween movies, while they can be entertaining, are simply just not it. The Rob Zombie Halloween movies were made, they're 100% a product of their time, because as hard as it is to fathom, 2008, 2009, 2007, when these Rob Zombie movies were made, was, 12 plus years ago. So, 13 plus years ago, probably. So keep that in mind, that these movies were made at a time where shock value was very much appreciated in a lot of these horror movies, and that's definitely where Rob Zombie went with these remakes. He definitely went for the shock and awe factor with these two movies, and the second movie just fell short. It had a very weird, sort of supernatural, and it wasn't like kind of the cheesy supernatural that you kind of got with the old Halloween movies. It was like this weird, hippy dippy supernatural thing, where I cannot remember her name all of a sudden, but Michael and Lori are basically they come together to kill Loomis, and it's this weird thing that I didn't really like, but I'm gonna stop complaining about it. Dave, what are your thoughts on the second Halloween movie from Rob Zombie?
Yeah, I don't like it at all. I don't. Spoiler: I don't like either of the Rob Zombie movies. I think he guts Halloween for what it is good for. That just the spooky, the suspense, the creepy, whatever else. And I think he tries to lean more to the gore and that like you said, the shock and I like these things, right? I don't mind them, but to me that's not what Halloween needs to ride on. And like we've said so many times, with so many Rob Zombie projects, or in my opinion, the majority of Rob Zombie projects, it's just too much, right? He doesn't know where to find balance. He doesn't know, in my eyes, doesn't know where to stop. It's an overindulgence to me. Now, the first one that he made, when you watch it, to be completely crystal clear, I've only watched these two movies once a piece, and I just had zero desire to ever watch them again. I should at some point, just because, but I just don't. It makes me cringe to think about watching them. I don't like them. I just feel like a lot of his movies, there comes a point when you're watching it and you think, oh, there you go, it's done. And then it's not. And it just goes on for another 30, 40 minutes. It's just so, there's too much. There's too much of everything in a lot of his movies. It's just, it's too loud, too busy, too whatever. I don't even know the proper term. It's just too much. And that doesn't work in Halloween. Halloween relies a lot on what's not there, what's not right in front of your eyes. It relies a lot on that fear of Michael being in the shadows or being back there, even when he's not. You see shots and you look and you're like, is he back there? Is he in the darkness? Is he, whatever? It plants that fear in you, makes you on the edge of your seat expecting that. And zombies movies are just too much. I think, in my opinion, they're just too much in your face, and it loses that effect. And I don't know. I think it tries to give too much backstory to Michael. And I just don't think you need all that, right? Michael was always, especially in the first movie, and Michael's he's just evil. Just evil. There doesn't need to be a whole lot of reason why. He just is. And I don't know. I'm not a big fan at all of these movies. And and I don't particularly like his first one, but I like the second one even less. So
Yeah, absolutely. And Dave, you can lead us into number 12 here, which should come as no surprise given our current conversation.
Yeah, number 12 is Halloween by Rob Zombie, released August 31st, 2007, written and directed by Rob Zombie, starring Malcolm McDowell, Scout Taylor Compton, and Tyler Mane as Michael Myers. It grossed 80,460,948 at the box office. Again, I don't know. There's a whole lot more we can say about it. It's the same reasonings for me of the second one. And this first Halloween is the one particularly, and again, I haven't watched it in a while, but I just remember when I watched it, there was a distinct point where I thought it should have been the finish. It made sense to me. It was a logical finish, and then it went on. And then so I don't know. Despite the problems I already had with it, and again, I know there's a lot of people that love Zombie and love his stuff, and or whatever. More power to you. Not me. I'm not a big Rob Zombie fan, and really though, if you rank his movies, his takes on the Halloween, I dislike those even more than his other stuff. I mean, it's just I just wish he had not. I don't know. I just don't think the original telling of Halloween needs to be retold. If you want to do something else and try to tell a new tale, fine, go for it. But I think when you're trying to retell the beginnings, I think you're already failed even before you start. And so again, it's the same reasons I don't like the other one. The first one, they just go hand in hand to me.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The only other thing I would add is that I don't like sort of the so it kind of this movie sort of adds to like the depravity of Michael, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it also adds a level of cruelty to it. And again, I understand he's supposed to be evil, but like it never seemed like I don't know. It never seemed like in the other movies he ever, I guess it depends on kind of how your interpretation of it, but in this movie, like he like tortures a kid, you know what I mean, like beats him up with a tree branch and all that other stuff, and it just kind of seems out of character for like the original Michael Myers, because the original Michael Myers was basically just sort of like a weird kid who just one day killed his older sister, and that was that, you know what I mean, and it kind of made sense. It kind of played into the sort of the mystery of it, but this one kind of just feels like they tried too hard to make him like an actual serial killer, and it just didn't make sense. So
Yeah, I think it's okay when you say there's a question of why. Why did he do it? It's okay just to not answer.
yeah,
And just leave people to whatever, come up with their own reasoning and their own thinking behind it.
absolutely. But with that being said, we're gonna go ahead and move on from number 12 to number 11. And again, if you've never watched their show, this again may come as a surprise.
The only
But
surprise may be that this didn't come 13.
exactly. I would agree. But I think that this one does deserve a little bit of a spot above Rob
Oh
Zombie.
yeah, no doubt.
But but number 11 is Halloween Ends.
Yeah, there's a gap. There's a gap. For as much as I do not like Halloween Ends, there's a gap between this and the Rob Zombie films for me. I will watch Halloween Ends every single time over the Rob Zombies.
I agree. So Halloween Ends, for this little stat here for you guys, it was released on October 14th, 2022. It was written by Paul Brad Logan, Chris Bernier, Danny McBride, and David Gordon Green. Directed by David Gordon Green, and it stars Jamie Lee Curtis, Andy Matichak, Rowan Campbell, and James Jude Courtney as the Shape. So, Halloween Ends. We did a whole episode basically talking about this movie.
Yeah.
And I can't say that my opinion has changed all that much. Now, to be fair, I watched it one time in theaters, and then shortly after I watched it on streaming, as soon as it came out, like a week or two later. So I haven't watched it in some time. I just the other day finished the 2018 Halloween and started into Halloween Kills. So I am rewatching that trilogy. So maybe next time I'll have watched those two movies, and maybe my opinion will have changed. But at least from what I can remember, my opinion has not changed all that much. Halloween Ends is a fine movie, but it just seems sort of disappointing to call it a Halloween movie when most of the movie had nothing to do with Michael Myers.
Yeah. And I don't think we need to say a whole, because again, there's a whole episode, and we did on this. My thing is this: I write it a lot. We say a lot. I don't hate Halloween Ends. That's not the point.
Right.
It's okay, right? It's not that it's not a bad movie per se. my biggest gripe is it never felt like a Halloween movie to me. And I know, people explain what they're thinking is. I get it. I understand. I think I understand what they were going for, and that's fine. But it doesn't feel right to me. And I know, I mean, I like a lot of bad, cheesy movies, so I don't. But when you just take this franchise as a whole, I mean, something's got to pull the short straw, and it's Halloween Ends for me. And it's not that it's bad. It's just not one of my favorites. Now, I will say, on a touch of a side note, I just realized something, and I did text you this. Like Rowan Campbell, who plays what's his name? I don't even remember what his name is in this movie. Whatever his name is, Corey in the movie, the main dude was in an episode of Supernatural playing a werewolf. Did not realize this till just the other day, even though I watched this series so many times. Blew my mind because I kept looking up like, who is that guy? Who is that guy? I recognize this guy. Who is he? And then I said, pause it. I'm like, holy shit. That's fucking Corey. It was just so wild. It was so weird because I thought I'd never seen him in anything before Halloween Ends, but that's not true. So.
Truly a small world. Truly a small
I guess.
world.
Yeah, whatever it is, 7 Degrees of Supernatural with Dave. Yeah,
that's right.
So, all right. So rolling on to number 10. Oh, let's talk some Busta Rhymes. Number 10, Halloween Resurrection, released July 12th, 2002. Written by Larry Brand and Sean Hood. Directed by Rick Rowenthal. Starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Busta Rhymes, Bianca whatever, and Brad Lorry as Michael Myers. It grossed $37,664,855 at the box office. I believe I don't know what, we got kind of on a side talk about this one time. This movie gets a lot of heat, and again, I don't hate this movie. I really don't, and I really like the concept of having the reality show in the Myers home. I like the concept behind it. I think it's clever. I think it is a cool approach to the series to do something different, and it worked at that time, especially in 2002. It worked because it was that was relevant at that time.
Yeah.
It missed on some execution. I know a lot of people cue in on the Busta Rhymes kicking Michael's ass and some of the things he says at the end. Yeah, those are a little hokey. It's a little much. I think it could have toned that down a little bit. I don't have a problem with Busta Rhymes at all. He was good in the movie, in my opinion. But yeah, the fact that he was really kind of kicked Michael Myers' ass, really said some of the, whatever the Kentucky Fried or whatever comments at the end and different things.
A little crispy, Mikey.
Yeah, crispy, stuff like that. Just a little much for me. But the movie's not a complete miss for me because again, I do like this reality show concept. But I don't know. It's just, again, in the grand scheme, it's just not as enjoyable for me as some of the others.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the deal. I do have a special place in my heart for this movie because I think it's funny. I think Busta Rhymes is great in the movie. But this movie, it did a lot of things that, in the grand scheme of things, was not great. They killed Laurie Strode like right in the beginning of the movie. You know what I mean? And I don't hate it because I guess it kind of fits in with sort of the working concept of these kind of movies. But yeah, it's, he kills Laurie Strode right at the beginning. And then you have this whole kind of setup. And I do like the concept of the reality TV show. And I love the concept of, the cameras and like, I think the character's name is like Declan or whatever. That's like messaging her, trying to like tell her where Michael is the entire time. So, I love the concept, like you said, for the time, spectacular idea. Definitely breathed some new life into the franchise and made it a little more modern. But yeah, it falls short in a lot of ways. And I mean, that's why it's number 10 on our list of 13.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, in the grand scheme, it's I don't know, not as enjoyable as the other. So let's march on as we're now diving into the top 10.
Yep. All right, so number 9, we have Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. This is released October 13th, 1989. It is written by Michael Jacobs, Dominique Othen, Gerard, and Shem Bitterman, and is directed by Dominique Othenin Gerard.
We're doing well with the names here.
For real. And then it's starring Donald Pleasance, Danielle Harris, Ellie Cornell, and Don Shanks as Michael Myers. This movie grossed $11,642,254 at the box office. So the reason I think Halloween 5 Revenge of Michael Myers is here on this list is, in my opinion, Halloween 5 is not a bad movie. I enjoy all of the Halloween movies to some varying degree. But Halloween 5 just kind of seems like sort of a bump in the road when it comes to sort of that trilogy of movies. Because for the most part, 4, 5, and 6 act as a series of movies, right? 4, 5, and 6 tell sort of the cohesive story of the Mark of Thorn. Number 5 just sort of seemed like, again, a bump in the road, right? Just kind of seemed like it was there. It didn't really provide me anything special. There were some cool things in that 5 that I appreciate from the movie. But overall, it wasn't anything special. I wouldn't go out of my way to say this is the greatest Halloween movie. But I can appreciate it. Is kind of what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's all right. Yeah, you're right. It's almost a little boring, right? It's just
Yeah.
not a lot to it. It leans a little too heavy into that supernaturally stuff with the psychic link type thing or whatever, and it's a little much for me. But it's not horrible. And I know the Thorn, the Mark of Thorn stuff. It's a little divisive in Halloween fans, right? It seems like there's a lot that really love it, that just are dying to get a conclusion to this story, that part of the story. I know there's some that really hate it and think, oh, this doesn't even fit into the Halloween. But I'm kind of in the middle, right? I can appreciate it, and the concept, but I think there's a lot of misses with what they tried to deliver amongst the
Right.
three movies. But of the three, this one was just kind of bleh. It didn't have enough there to me. But while we're talking about this trilogy, let's move on then to number 8. Which brings us to Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, which kicked off this little trilogy of movies. It was released on October 21st, 1988, written by Donnie Lipsis, Larry Ratner, and Benjamin Ruffner, and Alan B. McElroy. Directed by Dwight H. Little, starring Donald Pleasance, Ellie Cornell, Danielle Harris, and George P. Wilbur as The Shape. It grossed $17,768,757 at the box office. And again, this is not a bad movie. And to me, this is a good bridge movie between the Halloweens that we had. I mean, if you exclude 3, talking 1 and 2 in that timeline, and into this, Mark of Thorn stuff, it's a pretty good bridge, right? I think it finds a good balance amongst the two sides a little bit. But again, when you start getting into the cult and the supernaturally stuff, it not that it's bad and not that it's not a good concept, but it doesn't feel Halloween to me, right? It loses some of that. I don't know it's hard to describe. I don't hate the movie, but there's some of the same issues with these 3 that I find with Halloween Ends. Is parts of it don't feel like a Halloween movie, and but it has a little more to me than Halloween Ends. But again, it's not horrible, but it's, I don't know, it's just kind of there, and it's such lukewarm for me, right? There's parts that I think are okay, parts I really don't like of it, and that's kind of how these Cult of Thorn movies are for me, right? It's like a love-hate relationship.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. The Mark of Thorn, Cult of Thorn, Curse of Thorn, that whole concept, it just feels very much like that sort of. It just felt like a very stereotypical 80s 90s like attempt at reviving a franchise. You know what I mean? A lot of the franchises were doing this. Friday the 13th brought Jason back from the dead. Nightmare on Elm Street kind of sort of got into the crazy demon stuff about Freddy and everything else, and it seems sort of, the series of movies, again, they're enjoyable, they're not horrible by any means, but it just feels sort of like, okay, yeah, this is just kind of what they're doing just to kind of make the series more relevant, and it definitely falls flat in a lot of ways. Halloween 4 is not bad. It follows up again essentially a few years after Halloween 2. And Jamie Lee Curtis isn't in this movie, but we have Danielle Harris, who's her daughter, I believe, is the story here,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly. And yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It's not the worst movie. It's not the best movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's some of the callbacks with the clown costume and stuff. That's kind of neat, right? That
Right.
some of those parallels. It's kind of cool where you hint at that connection, right? With that I like that. That's okay. Again, the whole concept. Oh, yep, she's got a daughter. Here she is. And it's like, it's because it's almost like, okay, we can't get Lori, so let's develop Lori Jr. And it's like, okay, I don't know. It felt that it is what it is. No, I like the characters. Okay, I like Danielle Harris, but I don't know. It always, no matter how much you want to like it or whatever, that part of it, you always have to say, yeah, but it's not Laurie Strode, right? It's
Right.
not. So it's hard not to pull that comparison. So,
No, absolutely. I
but
have
while
to
we're
agree.
talking about it, Ike, why don't you move on and let's close this little trilogy out.
That's right. And this was not intentional, but to close out the Curse of Thorn trilogy, we have at number 7, Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. This was released September 29th, 1995, and written by Daniel Farrens, directed by Joe Chappelle, starring Donald Pleasance, Paul Rudd, Marion Hagen, and George P. Wilbur as the Shape. It grossed $15,116,634 at the box office. So, the Curse of Michael Myers, which is the 6th in the franchise, a lot of people don't like this movie. Right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
A lot of people ubiquitously in the Halloween community basically say, yeah, this is not a good movie. But for me, I watched the movie before. I watched the producer's cut, which in my opinion, producer's cut is the best way to watch this movie. It in my opinion is a solid Halloween movie. It kind of fixes some of the issues with the Mark of Thorn stuff. In my opinion, it leans very heavily into the cult part of it, which I feel like they kind of needed to do to make it make sense. Um, and so they leaned heavily into the cult part of it. They basically did everything they could to make this sort of be the conclusion of the story, but with a twist, of course. This movie's very campy in a lot of ways, has a lot of cheese, but it's not a bad movie. I enjoy this movie a lot. I like Paul Rudd in it. I think he's funny. And the kind of the concept around it's really great too. So, it might be nostalgia, but I enjoy Curse of Michael Myers.
I don't think it's bad. And again, I like Paul Rudd in it. I like the way the way he plays the character. And I don't know, part of that cheese is probably one of the reasons I like it the best of the three, because everybody knows I like some cheese with my horror. And so that's probably why I like it the best of the three. I think, I don't know. I think people disregard it too quickly without really just kind of opening their mind and just trying to enjoy it. And again, no one's going to claim that any of these three of this trilogy are these spectacular entries in the Halloween franchise per se, but they are what they are. And everybody needs to also keep in the context, they are very much a product of their time. And, so yeah, when you look at it now with 2020 eyes, yeah, maybe you see, what the hell are they thinking? But if you take some of these same concepts and deliver it now, it would come out differently with when you have some of the production values and some of the sheen you could put on it and some of the, rough up, clean up some of the rough parts of the script. It might work a little better, but they did what they could do at that time with this story. And, they tried something different with these three movies, without doing the same old, masked man pursuing the babysitter or pursuing his sister or whatever.
Right.
They tried something different, and there's nothing wrong with that. And sometimes it works really well. Sometimes it doesn't work as well. And then sometimes, like I said, these kind of fall right in the middle of the road. I don't hate them. I don't particularly love them, but they're not. I don't think they're as bad as people claim.
Yeah.
And again, I know there's a lot of people that love them, and there's a lot of people that hate them, but I kind of fall in that middle. That I think they're okay, and they're not necessarily my first go-to choices when I sit down to rewatch a Halloween movie, but they're also not something that I would cry about if I was rewatching. So
That's fine.
yeah,
Only one I'm crying about might be Halloween Ends. We'll see.
yeah. or the Rob Zombies.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. All right, that brings us to number 6 on our rankings, and it is Halloween 2, released October 30th, 1981, written by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, directed by Rick Rosenthal, starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Donald Pleasance, and Dick Warlock as the Shape. It grossed $25,533,818 at the box office. I will say decisively, as far as horror sequels go, Halloween 2 is one of the best ones ever. Especially for a movie that they didn't want to have a sequel, they didn't intend to have a sequel, and to do something like this, because it has the same feel as Halloween as the first one. It really does, but they mixed it up a little with it, with the hospital. And they had the big, Vader being Luke's father moment with, finding out that, Laurie's his sister, and and while a lot of people shake their head at that, it's still, when you want to have a little impactful moment, man, how can it be more impactful than that? And I really think, as far as horror sequels go, I think Halloween 2, it works. And I think when you watch 1 and 2 together, I mean, it's not flawless. Don't get me wrong at all. But when you watch them 1 and 2 together, I think it feels more cohesive than what it should, given the fact that they didn't have a sequel in mind. They didn't intend to have a sequel, or did have this story. It really feels like they did, like they had this story, and let's break it into 2 parts, because it really flows. And I love sequels that are just, it goes from the first movie right into the second, right? There's no, not to say that time gaps don't work, blah blah blah, and I have any issue with it, but man, when you have one movie that just goes time wise straight into the other, it's something cool about that for me. And it feels like, again, like you're watching a movie in 2 parts, a big movie in 2 parts. And there's some issues, right? I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis in the bad wig because she cut her hair for another movie part, and everything else, whatever. But I love Halloween 2, and there are other movies that I really enjoy more in the franchise. When you go from 6 to 1 in this from here on out, I love them all.
Yeah.
I don't. These are all some of my favorite movies, or whatever else. There's, 6 to 1 on our list. I love every one of them, and I love Halloween 2.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Halloween 2 as well. Like you said, as it comes for, like, back in the day sequels to a horror movie, Halloween 2 does a fantastic job, especially for a movie that was made 3 years after the original. It doesn't feel like any time has passed. It feels like a very cohesive story. It feels like they're able just to go right from where they were in Halloween to Halloween 2. And like you said, it makes, this obviously introduces the concept of, them being siblings, which makes the terror even so much more, because in Halloween 2, he's specifically targeting her, whereas in the first Halloween movie, it just kind of seems like just kind of seems random, right? It just kind of seems like Laurie was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But Halloween 2 sort of introduces that just secondary, I guess you would say, turmoil of he is targeting Laurie. The people around her are dying because he was targeting her. And so it definitely introduces another layer of complexity to the whole concept of Michael. And it's such a good movie. Halloween 2 is a good movie. I recently watched it, and it definitely holds up. It's a lot more violent, I would say, than the first movie. Definitely some more gore. But that's how sequels used to be. Sequels always used to try and amp up the violence just to sort of capitalize on the character from the first. So
Yeah, and we're getting into the 80s, right? That's what people were starting to want. And plus it's got Lance Guest in it, who I love, from The Last Starfighter, who played the one EMT. I love him, right? Because I love The Last Starfighter. So it was cool seeing him in this, and I just think it's I love it. I love Halloween 2. I don't get the heat it gets sometimes, because I've seen a lot of people really trash Halloween 2. I don't get it. I really don't. I don't see it. But
no, not at all.
so all right, moving on. Top 5 time.
Yep, top 5. Number 5, we have Halloween Kills, released October 15, 2021, written by Scott Teems, Danny McBride, and David Gordon Green, directed by David Gordon Green, and it stars Jamie Lee Curtis, Judy Greer, Andy Matichak, and James Jude Courtney as the Shape. It grossed $133,423,964 at the box office. So, looking at Halloween Kills. Halloween Kills is the second in the 3-movie trilogy that Dave Gordon Green created. He created Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and then Halloween Ends. So these movies are meant to be watched as a trilogy. I will say that Halloween and Halloween Kills are another one of those movies that are seamlessly transitioned. Halloween 2018 seamlessly transitions into Halloween Kills, and I recently, like I said, I started rewatching it. I haven't finished it, but I've seen Halloween Kills a good number of times since it came out, and I would say that even in retrospect, it's such a good movie. There's so much good to say about Halloween Kills. Halloween Kills, again, it amps up the violence of Halloween 2018, and it tells a story of a wounded and just, I would say, I would even go as far to say potentially as an afraid Michael Myers. He's escaped from near death in 2018's Halloween, and now he's trying to find solace in his old family home. So Halloween Kills has, again, a lot of great stuff about it. The ending of Halloween Kills is actually really great. How they close out that movie is just superb. If you've never seen it, spoiler alert, but the scene where they're all beating on Michael and then Michael basically turns the tables, it just cements I guess you could say, like, invulnerability that you kind of expect from Michael. And this just gives him sort of like that supernatural-esque ability that you expect from him. Because we didn't see a lot of that in Halloween 2018. But this one truly put fear back into the concept of Michael Myers as this indomitable force. So I love Halloween Kills. Such a good movie.
Yeah, I do too. I like it. I think it's real cool. That opening, the early scene with him and the firefighters, man, just slaying all the firefighters. That's pretty wild, man. It's such a cool way to open that movie. I love the where they're riding in the back of that truck, right? Like how the first movie ends, where you think, oh, that they've killed him. They're riding to get away and everything. That you feel like they could finally relax, and then as they're riding and all the fire trucks coming by, and they're like, no, 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 just let it burn. And don't give him, and it's so cool how it transitions from triumph to defeat so quickly. And that moment with the passing of the fire rescue stuff. And it is such a good movie. And that's, I think the Halloween Kills, I enjoy them so much, and I think that's part of the reason that Halloween Ends disappoints me so much.
Yeah.
That it's not a bad movie, but I really like the other two so much that I just feel like it was such a drop for me. And but we're not going to go back to the Halloween Ends thing, but I do. I love Halloween Kills. It's a fun movie. But again, here's going to be the one. This is going to be the one where the soapbox is coming out on.
Yeah.
Because this is one of my personal missions in life. And coming in at number 4 is Halloween H2O 20 years later. It was, maybe this is part of the reason, it was released on August 5th, 1998, which is, would have been my 23rd birthday. It was written by Robert Zapia, directed by Steve Miner, starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Josh Hartnett, and Chris Durant as Michael Myers. Grossed $55,041,738 at the box office. Folks, Halloween H2O is one of the most underappreciated Halloween movie out there. I absolutely fucking love Halloween H2O. I think it is such a good movie on how it transitions from Halloween to, let's skip 20 years and what's happening. And it showing how Laurie has gone away, started a completely new life, changed her name. It has made it as secluded as she could possibly get, right? And escaping. And she gets to this point where, hey, everything seems cool, but she's on high alert, and she's struggling, right? She struggles with alcohol. She struggles with pills to try to keep her sanity. But she's starting to feel some happiness, right? She's in a relationship that seems to be going well, and feels like she's able to open up to him. So she lets the guard down, and she's going to let her son go on this trip when he doesn't go, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so you feel like she's gotten to this point where she feels like, okay, maybe I can relax just a little. And I can enjoy life a little, and I can have a little happiness. So that is the perfect time to cue up Michael Myers. And, right when she starts to feel this joy, Michael comes back into it. And man, I love this movie. I love it. The only things that the biggest things I don't like about this movie is, number one, Josh Hartnett's haircut. I don't know what the fuck that is. and I don't want to hear anybody saying this kid's 1998. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know too many people in 1998 going around with their hair like that. But so be it, whatever it is. But it has a great, great cast. In it, and LL Cool J. Come on, LL Cool J was Busta Rhymes before Busta Rhymes, and in this movie, and it's just, man, it's so damn good. I just don't, and again, I don't know. It's not that I see a lot of people hating on this movie. I just feel like it's underappreciated. That when people talk about Halloween movies, I don't hear this one talked about nearly enough as it should. I absolutely love this movie.
Yeah. I have to agree. This movie, in my opinion, because I've heard some hate on this movie, and a lot of people say it's just the reason the reason a lot of people don't like this movie is probably because it was one of those late 90s, early 2000s-esque movies, and a lot of these movies that kind of came out in this time frame, people don't like. And I think it's mostly because there's sort of a stigma with some of these movies because they oftentimes are rehashings of old material, or at the very least, they are sometimes failed attempts at rebooting franchises. So,
but I don't feel like this movie has either of those.
No, I agree.
I think people are prejudging that for other stuff. I don't feel this movie has either of those trappings.
And no, I don't either, because I think that this movie wasn't even trying to reboot the franchise. In my opinion, what Halloween H2O was trying to accomplish was it was trying to tell the story of Laurie Strode without the whole Curse of Thorn thing.
Yes.
That was the purpose of this movie and of Resurrection. This movie and Resurrection, and again, we talked about Resurrection already, but they're obviously supposed to be meant to be sort of part of the same trilogy, because there's multiple timelines, and we haven't really talked a lot about the whole timeline thing, but there's like the Mark of Thorn timeline, which is 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. Then you have the David Gordon Green timeline, which is 1, Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends. Then you have Rob Zombie, and we haven't talked about it yet, but Season of the Witch is its own thing. And then you have the H20 timeline, which is it's mostly deemed as, which is 1, 2, H2O, and Resurrection. H2O is supposed to be meant as, like, in my opinion, a better sequel to Halloween 2 than Halloween 4 was. And It was supposed to be the actual story of Laurie Strode versus what we got in the other timeline. So H2O, in my opinion, did not have the same shortcomings that Halloween 4 had. It did not have the same shortcomings that, Halloween Resurrection had. H2O, in my opinion, is a nearly flawless sequel to a sequel that you could almost get. Nearly flawless.
Yeah, I feel like people that hate on it are prejudging it and are not watching it with an open mind, because it is I think it's a really, really good movie. And I just do. I think it's got some creative kills. I think it's got some good scare moments. There's there's some good fights. And the thing is, because it builds out how traumatized she is, and how she's doing everything she can, seclusion, alcohol, prescriptions, to try to keep that in check, right? So she can live a life. And then, but it doesn't just go to a point where she just drops it. I'm okay. Now I'm going to fight Mike. No, it gives her a reason, because she's protecting her son. So it gives her a reason to say, which David Gordon Green, it does a little bit of that. But this is, it's less militant, right? She's scared. She's terrified. She's seeing him all over the place in her mind, and she doesn't want any part of it, right? And she just wants to try to forget and do what she can. But when the time comes and she has to, she says, okay, whatever, I got to get past this because I got to protect my kid. And that's what it is. And there's the whole conflict with the kids. It's like, God, you got to let this go. It's been 20 years. He's not coming back. He's dead. It's done. You've got to let it go. And then he's not, and he's back. And the kid's like, shit, she was right. And I don't know, man. Again, I know that I like some bad movies, and that I have some weird movies that I put, up on pedestals that I love. And this is one of them. When you talk about some of my favorite movies, I love Halloween H2O. And I will forever be the flag bearer that it is a severely, severely underappreciated movie. And I would love to see it get a lot more love in the internet world and with horror fans. And I know there's got to be other people out there that love it too. So I just want them to speak up and make their voices heard a little more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel like I'm going to put a poll out there and get a feel for what people think after this episode's out, and see, do you love, hate, or indifferent to H2O, and see the feedback we get.
Yeah, I'd be interested
I'm
to
curious.
see that.
And I don't know. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I knew this was going to be one that I was really gonna get hung up on, because again, I it's so underappreciated.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking of underappreciated, this next movie I also kind of feel falls into that category. Maybe not to the same degree as H2O. But as you've probably noticed, this list has surprisingly lacked yet a movie that also sometimes gets hate in the internet sphere, but also sometimes gets a lot of love. So at number 3 for us, we have number 3, Season of the Witch. Written by Tommy Lee Wallace, directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, and it was released October 22nd, 1982, starring Tom Atkins, Stacey Nelkin, and it grossed $14,400,000 at the box office. So, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. For the most part, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch is unanimously known as sort of the odd one out. For a lot of people who don't know, the sort of idea of the Halloween franchise in the beginning was to make it an anthology. It was never meant to be the same story being retold, or even the same story being put on the same timeline. It was meant to just be an anthology. It was meant to be something different. And Halloween 3 was really the only version of that we ever got, because Michael Myers got so popular that it was almost impossible to make a Halloween movie without him in it. So Halloween 3 Season of the Witch has nothing to do with Michael Myers. Halloween 3 Season of the Witch is a movie about the Silver Shamrock masks basically taking over the world. These masks, if you wore them when the signal alarmed, would basically melt your brain. And basically the whole concept was that these guys were trying to stop this from happening. And this movie has so many great things about it. It has conspiracy. It has, these kind of weird like villains that are creepy, and it has the masks, which are very interesting, but also, very, very deadly. And these masks also made a cameo in Halloween Kills. There are people. It's when they drive up to the playground. There are people on the merry-go-round who are wearing the 3 masks, I believe, who are dead. So, in my opinion, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch is one of my favorites. This is actually my wife's favorite Halloween movie. Kayla loves Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. We watch it every year, of course. She very much enjoys it. She thinks it's probably, in her opinion, one of the better Halloween movies from the old days, from the olden days. And I would agree with her. I think Season of the Witch does not get the credit it deserves at all. Not at all.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of love for this movie online. There is some very, very strong supporters, and there are other people that hate it. I think it's swinging more. When it first came out, it was hated because, and here's the issue. The problem was because people went, and it was a Halloween movie, and they didn't see Michael Myers. If this movie had just been released and been called Season of the Witch with no Halloween on it, I think it would have been huge. I think it would have been big. I think it would have done really, really well, because people wouldn't have gone in with the expectations that they were going to see Michael Myers. This movie is great. It is such a fun fucking movie. And and I love it for just absolutely pure watchability. For me, it's right up there with the original for me. One and two. If I just want to throw on one just to watch and have a good time, uh, I'm usually going with this one. I love this. Tom Atkins is so good in it. The masks are iconic. They are so cool and so iconic. And it is just a fun story. And again, I love cheesy campy horror, and this is exactly what this is. And it's just so good, right? And does it fit into Halloween and all that? Nope. But who cares, right? It's a Halloween movie. It is what it is. But I think the lack of success it originally had is because people had expectations that they were seeing a Michael Myers movie.
Yeah.
I think if they could have taken that away and called it whatever else without the Halloween ties, this movie would have been seen completely different. Because again, it is a good movie, especially for 1982. It is a good movie, and it's so much fun. It's absolutely one of my favorite movies of all time. I love it.
Yeah. Absolutely. 100% agreed.
And the Silver Shamrock song will get stuck in your head for days.
Happy Halloween. Silver Shamrock.
Well, people are playing along, and they've heard us talk at the opening show. I think people could probably figure out what 1 and 2 is for us.
Yes.
So at number 2 is Halloween from 2018. It was released on October 18th, 2018. Written by Jeff Radley, Danny McBride, and David Gordon Green. Directed by David Gordon Green. Starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Judy Greer, Andy Matichak, and James Jude Courtney as the Shape. It grossed $249,939,835 at the box office. This movie was incredible. I remember, being so excited for it, so much anticipation, and it didn't let me down. It is, while we talked about H2O and the portrayal of what Jamie Lee Curtis would have been like years later coming out of it, this is the same concept, right? This is not Jamie Lee Curtis, but Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee, of course. Anyway, it is the concept of what Laurie Strode would have been like after Halloween years later.
Yeah.
So the exact same concept, and it takes a different route with it, but still one that feels very appropriate, right? She's very almost militant, right? She's very standoffish. It's that same seclusion, right? She stays away from stuff, but it's like she is constantly training and prepping for that return. And she did the same with her daughter to make sure she's ready, because she was convinced that Michael will return appropriately or correctly assumed, because it happens, obviously. And everybody thinks that she's nuts and off her rocker, because everybody else thinks, no, he's dead. It's not happening. And it causes problems with her daughter, which in turn causes some problems with her granddaughter, who, circumvents the mom to see the grandma and whatever. So there's all this family tension because of this. And because if you take it, at face value, Laurie looks off her, she's nuts, right? Because everybody else assumes he's dead. It's gone. It's done. And it's not the case, right? And he comes back, raises his usual hell. And I love how when this happens, though, when he's back and things are happening, you have those 3 core characters of, Laurie, the daughter, and the granddaughter. And when Michael comes back, it all starts happening. Those 3 are all separated, right? So you have essentially these 3, the chaos and terror of Michael, and these 3 are trying to come back together to find each other and figure out what to do. And then when it happens and you're back at Laurie's house and you get that, the final, what we quote unquote thinks the final standoff, or at least in this movie, and you see, how she's prepped this house. Some really cool things, right? She checks the room, clears the room. She has a gate that comes down to seal that room off so that once it's cleared, it stays cleared. It's pretty cool stuff, right? For someone who's clearly thought this stuff through. And then, how it ends, with him being trapped in the basement, the house being set on fire, whatever else. And then, of course, which leads us into kills after that. But this movie's great. It pairs well with the original Halloween, because there's obviously clearly a time gap you have to have, right? Because of the real time gap, and it works. And it brings Halloween to the present day without trying to restart it or reboot it or, recreate it. It just says, okay, we had Halloween in 78. What happens now if there's Halloween in, 2018? where is this story now? And it works. It really does. And it paints such a good picture of that terror for that 40 years never went away. It was always there for her. And while other people that didn't firsthand experience this, they can play it off and think it's done. But for the trauma she went through, she can't. And, and obviously she was correct, but
Right. I think for me, Halloween 2018 is ranked this high because this was really probably, I mean, looking at the dates of these movies, Halloween 2018 was really like the first, it had to have been the first Halloween movie that I was ever able to go watch in theaters. Um,
mm,
Halloween 2018 was the first movie that I ever went and watched cognizantly remembering watching. um, and Halloween 2018, it tells a different story than any of the other Halloween movies. And in my opinion, this movie and the series that it's a part of alludes to the fact that, quite frankly, Michael Myers tried to kill Laurie Strode by pure coincidence. Michael Myers is a agent of chaos. He does not, he is just unadulterated terror and violence. He does not know how to aim his violence. He just goes. And that's sort of the story that's being told, is that he's not singling out Laurie Strode. Laurie Strode is a victim of circumstance, and the reason that he was there in Halloween 2018 was because of his doctor, Dr. Sartain. But like you said, this movie tells the story of PTSD, truly. This movie is what happens after you almost die as a teenager and you're afraid that you're going to die again, that's going to come back. And that's exactly what the story is. This story is Michael is a ever looming threat. He is the shape, the shadow. He is the boogeyman. He is that looming threat of potential death that always exists in the back of the mind of a victim. And that's basically what Halloween 2018 does. Halloween 2018 paints the picture that Laurie Strode never truly recovered from her encounter with Michael Myers in 1978 or whenever the first movie is supposed to take place. She never recovered, and she probably will never recover, as we can see from the other movies. Is that trauma is always going to be there. But also, this movie removes some of the cheese factor that the original movie kind of shoved into it. You know what I mean? You have the concept of them being siblings removed from the equation, which even further points to the fact that Laurie Strode was a victim of circumstance. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time in 1978, and she again was in the wrong place at the wrong time in 2018 because Dr. Sartain made it happen. And it's such a good movie, and it just covers a lot of ground. It basically ties up a lot of those logical loopholes, so that way it could be a direct sequel to the first movie. But also it does it in a way that makes sense. You know what I mean? It makes sense that once Michael Myers was apprehended, of course, they're going to throw his ass into a mental institution, and they're going to study him because this is a kid that escaped mental institution once, and now they're like, okay, well, let's try and not have this happen again. But it makes sense why it happened because Dr. Sartain was the one that orchestrated his release. So, it all makes sense. It all kind of comes down to it. And I also like that Zartan was like the Dr. Loomis, but the evil version of Dr. Loomis.
yeah.
And one of my favorite things about 2018 is they obviously had to, they had to use some, movie magic to make it happen. But the recordings of Dr. Loomis saying that he should be exterminated or whatever he says, he needs to, I recommend that you kill him, and I will be there to make sure his heart stops beating. And then we automatically cremate the body, which is 100% what Dr. Loomis would say. Dr.
Yeah.
Loomis was like, I'm not putting up with this shit. This guy is pure fucking evil. So, yeah, I love 2018. I could talk about it all day.
Yeah, me too. So, but let's go on. Again, everybody should know there's only one movie left, Ike, so lay it on them.
As like you said, if you're playing along, there's only one possibility, and we kind of buried the lead a little bit on this, I guess. But
Yeah.
Halloween, released on October 27th, 1978, written by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, directed by John Carpenter, starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Donald Pleasance, Nick Castle as the Shape. Grossed $70 million at the box office. This is the pinnacle of the Halloween franchise. This is the beginning of it all. This is the OG. This is the grandpappy of Halloween. This is also the grandfather of all, I would say, modern slasher movies. Halloween, 1978, is a masterpiece. It is a masterclass in horror and in the slasher genre. Michael Myers is the absolute horrifying spirit, the specter, the Shape. You know, he's credited as the Shape for a reason. He's meant to be this looming threat that you cannot always see. He's in the shadows. And I love the original Halloween movie. We sang the praises of Halloween, but some things that we didn't mention earlier that I want to mention now, the music. Halloween's music was so good. John Carpenter himself made the music for Halloween. And the music of this movie is just so good. And it's just so crazy that a movie from 1978 has such good music. And not only good music, but iconic music. The Halloween theme song, you know. Na, 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 na. It's just, that is iconic. It's been redone, remade, re-idolized in so many different ways over the years. But every time I hear that music, I always get the goosebumps. Every single time. No matter when I see it, hear it, or whatever, that music kicks on, immediate goosebumps, immediate chills. Because it's so iconic. So, like we said, we've sang the praises. I won't drone on too long. But it's just like there's so much good about this movie. So much that it did not only for the horror movie the horror movie franchise itself, but horror movies in general, but also just any slasher movie, any modern horror movie you watch today probably uses or derives something from what Halloween did back in 1978.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. There's not much else to say. Like I said, we talked a lot about it at the beginning of the show. I mean, the 80s were great for horror movies, right? And it really kicked off the horror industry for what it is, and it allowed it to grow into what it is now. Even so, even if you're not particularly a fan of those movies and you like more modern movies, it was still where it began to grow into what it is. And I don't know the degree or if it would have happened the same without Halloween 78,
Yeah.
because what it did was it enabled and made everybody want to go make horror movies, because people thought, oh, we can do that and we can tell those stories and we can, we can make some money or whatever it is. And for every good, bad, cheesy or horrible, slasher that came through the 80s and after, spawned out of the success and the expertise of the original Halloween, which led to, growth and development and people that were fans that went on to make more modern films. So it and I'm not saying, there's stuff that, yes, there was stuff that came out before this and this, that, but as a genre, this really took the time, the direction that horror was moving, and Halloween 78 redirected it in a different way and completely changed the genre. Inadvertently, right? It was what it was, and made people, do more of a certain thing and redirect it. Again, there's not much to be said. The movie's perfect. It stands the test of time to me. Every time I watch it, it's just as enjoyable, and it doesn't feel dated. Yes, of course you watch it and you're aware it's taking place in the late 70s, but it doesn't, as a film, and the quality and the filmmaking, it doesn't feel bad, right? There's no gaps in any effects or things that you see in a lot of old movies. Sometimes you're like, oh, yeah, that's clearly made then, or whatever. You don't have that, right? And maybe part of that was how wise they were to not have a lot of gore and this and that and everything, because they didn't have to have a ton of those effects that maybe wouldn't stand to the test of time, right? To see through. It's just not there. So, yeah, I mean, I love the movie. It is one of my favorite, if not my favorite horror movie of all time. And, just one of my favorite movies of all time. And, so good in my eyes. It's perfect as it is. The story is perfect as it is. It should have never been tried to be retold. I understand, trying to build upon it and continue on with it. But as far as the original story and what this established, it never should have been touched. And, it might be part of the reason, besides the ones we explained, that, the Rob Zombie films don't stand up for me. It's like, you don't need to retell this part of it. It's perfect as it is. So just move on from that and build from there if you want. But anything you do, no matter how good it would have been, it just wouldn't have been the same. It just wouldn't have felt the same. So it's always going to come up short. So, I again, love the movie. I don't think anybody would be surprised that this is our number one. I think it would be number one for a lot of people. I think overwhelmingly it probably is number one for a lot of people because it's, everybody's got their favorites, right? I love Halloween 3. I love H2 or whatever else, but overall enjoyability, overall open to close, just goodness in all ways. The original Halloween is it. It set the bar for so much. And, I feel like, as much as it's out there and as much as I love and as much as it's good, I still feel like it's still trying to achieve that bar, right? There's not much that's gotten there since, for as good as some of it is. So.
Absolutely. And like I said, what more can you say about that masterpiece?
Absolutely. Well, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll close out this episode real quick and get out of here. Listen to Their Screams is now a Fangoria collaborator. Get 20% off your order at shop.fangoria.com by using the promo code LISTEN2SCREAMS at checkout. That is listen, the number 2, and screams. Or you can click the link in the show notes. All right, and we're back here on Listen to the Screams, and let's close out this episode. We've talked a long time, but there was 13 movies to discuss, so it is what it is. So once again, I think anybody that knows us is probably not surprised by these rankings. Everybody knows our favorites. We've spoke of our favorites here on the show many times, but we would like to hear some feedback from you guys on what your favorites are. So hit us up on social media and talk Halloween franchise with us. Our next episode will be the bonus episode that comes out on Halloween on October 31st itself, and it will be our Screams Family Holiday Special. We will be joined by our wives, Monica and Kayla, and we will be conducting a Halloween trivia game between Ike and I, as well as discussing all kinds of things about Halloween, some of our favorite things, some of our favorite experiences, and different things. It should be fun. It should be entertaining. People always enjoy when the wives are on and do the wives rebuttal. People always seem to enjoy when we do the trivia games. So we combine the two, and this is what we get.
If there's any indication on past trivia, I have a feeling Dave will probably lose.
Well, probably. I don't seem to be very good at trivia.
We'll see, though. We'll see. Because if I remember correctly, the wives are making these questions more holiday-based, too. So it's not necessarily all movies. So Dave might have a chance. We'll see.
Maybe I can pay him off.
Slip him a 20.
Never know. Yeah. I desperate times, desperate measures. All right. So that's our next episode. It will be out in just a matter of days. So hopefully everybody's doing lots of fun stuff for the Halloween season and will enjoy their holiday. But we will talk to you again on Halloween. Make sure you subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform and follow us on social media. So, Ike, before we close out and get out of here, anything you want to add?
Yeah, real quick, first and foremost, if you're doing anything fun this coming holiday season, as I always say, stay safe. But also, we have our Halloween special coming up, but I have to also mention briefly, I'm super excited for our next actual episode next week or whenever it comes out for Five Nights at Freddy's. I just had to mention it because at the time that this episode is going up, which is on Thursday, the very next day I'm going to see Five Nights in theaters. So I'm super stoked to watch that in theaters because, I'm a huge Five Nights at Freddy's fan, so I'm very excited.
Yeah, that episode will be out on November 2nd, so that's our next normal episode. So yeah, stand by for that. You got all kinds of goodness coming from us in the next week here. So
Oh yeah.
All right. So yeah, if you're out there doing lots of spooky stuff for Halloween, share the love with us. Put some pictures up and tweet or put it on Facebook or whatever it all calls and tag us in it. We like to see some of the fun you guys are having out there and represent us. So, but until the Halloween special, until the holiday when we are joined by the wives for the trivia game, wherever you go and whatever you do, be good, be safe, and have many pleasant nightmares.